In the busy center of the city, where tall buildings reached up to the sky, there was a small, quiet park. Its green grass stood out brightly against all the gray concrete around it. Sitting on a sunny bench, Emily closed her eyes and listened to the gentle sounds of the city. Her blonde hair fell over her shoulders, shining softly in the sunlight. Nearby, a street performer played a guitar, and the music mixed with the rustling leaves of the park's big, old trees. Emily took a deep breath, enjoying the peacefulness of the moment. Her tranquil moment was interrupted by the buzz of her phone. She picked it up, her eyes scanning the screen. A notification from her work's group chat. The office had messed up their hotel reservations for the business trip. They had 3 people and only 1 room to share. She felt a knot in her stomach. 2 of her colleagues, Tom and Rachel, would be joining her. Emily knew Tom was a bit of a flirt, and Rachel, while friendly, had an air of competitiveness that could be unnerving. She had hoped for a quiet trip to get away from the office dynamics, but now she was going to have to navigate a very different kind of situation. Emily met Tom and Rachel in the hotel lobby, where they were already deep in conversation with the flustered receptionist. She could tell by the look on their faces that the news of the shared room was not well received. The receptionist, a young man with a name tag that read Jerry, looked like he was about to apologize until Rachel cut him off with a sharp, "It'll have to do." They took their key cards and headed up to their floor. The room was smaller than any of them had imagined. A single king-size bed dominated the space, flanked by a tiny desk and a chair. There was a mini fridge, a TV that looked like it had seen better days, and a sad little armchair in the corner. Rachel threw her bag onto the bed with a dramatic sigh, claiming the middle spot. Emily and Tom exchanged awkward glances, then set their bags at the foot of the bed. "Well," Emily said, trying to keep the mood light, "it's going to be a cozy night." Rachel rolled her eyes. "This is ridiculous. We're adults, not college kids on spring break." Tom chuckled nervously. "It's not that bad. We can make the best of it." Emily nodded, trying to mask her own discomfort. "Yeah, let's just get changed and grab some dinner." They ordered room service and picked at their meals, the tension palpable as they discussed the business strategy for the upcoming meetings. Rachel was meticulous, laying out her points with precision, while Tom added his charming flair to the conversation. Emily found herself lost in thought, her mind racing with the implications of their unexpected living arrangement. As the evening progressed, they decided to unwind with a bottle of wine that Rachel had brought from home. The alcohol eased the tension, and they found themselves sharing stories. From past trips, the laughter filling the cramped room. Rachel, who had been the most uptight, began to loosen up, her cheeks flushing with every sip. Tom's eyes sparkled with mischief, and even Emily felt herself letting go of her reservations. The conversation grew more intimate as the bottle grew emptier. Rachel admitted her fear of flying and how she'd only ever traveled for work. Tom shared a hilarious story about accidentally booking a room with a waterbed during a previous trip. And Emily, feeling emboldened, talked about her secret love for romance novels. The 3 of them had never really bonded outside of work, but here they were, sharing their vulnerabilities and finding common ground. The night grew late, and the wine had done its work. Rachel, feeling particularly relaxed, suggested a game of truth or dare. Emily and Tom agreed, thinking it might be a good way to break the ice and have some fun. The game started off innocently enough, with dares to dance to a cheesy song and truths about their most embarrassing moments. But as the clock ticked closer to midnight, the dares grew bolder. Rachel's competitive spirit had them all doing increasingly silly things, like balancing a pillow on their heads while reciting Shakespeare. It was Tom's turn to dare Rachel. He leaned in, a playful smirk on his lips. "I dare you to kiss Emily." Rachel's eyes widened, and she looked at Emily, who felt the heat rise to her cheeks. Before she could protest, Rachel leaned over, her wine-stained smile meeting Emily's surprised gaze, and planted a kiss on her cheek. "Your turn, Em," Rachel said, passing the challenge back to Tom with a wink. Tom's eyes locked onto Emily's, his heart racing. He hadn't expected the game to go this far, but Rachel's daring spirit had set a new tone. He took a deep breath and leaned in, his lips brushing against hers gently. The room fell silent except for the sound of their breathing, the electricity between them undeniable. Rachel watched, a knowing smile playing on her lips, as the air grew thick with an unspoken tension. Without breaking their gaze, Tom reached over and placed his hand on Rachel's leg. "Truth or dare?" he whispered to her. The room felt like it was spinning as Rachel considered her options. The walls that had once felt like a prison now felt like the perfect cocoon for the three of them. "Truth," she murmured, her voice husky with desire. "How do you really feel about sharing this room with us?" Tom asked, his hand sliding further up her thigh. Rachel leaned back into the armchair, a seductive glint in her eyes. "Honestly, I think it's going to be a night to remember." And with that, the last of their inhibitions crumbled. They moved closer, the game forgotten, as the room grew hot with passion. The lines between colleagues blurred into something much more intimate. The business trip was about to take a turn none of them could have anticipated. Emily felt Rachel's hand on her waist, guiding her closer to the chair. Rachel's lips found hers, and Tom's hand gently cupped the back of her neck, deepening the kiss. It was a kiss that spoke of shared secrets and unspoken desires. Rachel's mouth was soft, yet insistent, and Emily couldn't help but give in to the allure of the moment. Tom's other hand began to explore Rachel's body, his touch light and teasing. Rachel gasped against Emily's mouth, her eyes fluttering closed. Emily felt a jolt of arousal shoot through her as Rachel's hand found its way to her own thigh. The room was a tapestry of sensations. The velvety feel of the armchair under Rachel's back, the warmth of Tom's hand on her neck, and the taste of the wine lingering on Rachel's tongue. Their kiss grew more urgent, and Rachel's hand began to trace patterns on Emily's skin. Emily's own hand found Tom's chest, her fingertips dancing over his shirt. The sound of fabric rustling filled the room as Rachel's dress slipped to the floor, revealing a black lace bra and matching underwear. Tom's eyes darkened with lust as he took in the sight, and he leaned in to kiss Rachel's neck, his breath hot against her skin. Rachel moaned, arching her back, her hand sliding under Emily's shirt to caress her bare skin. Emily's mind was a whirlwind of emotions, but the physical connection was too intense to deny. She kissed Rachel back with a passion that surprised even herself, her hand sliding up to Rachel's breast. Rachel's hand found its way into Emily's hair, pulling her closer as their bodies tangled together. Tom watched, his own arousal growing, before joining in. His kisses had trailed down Rachel's collarbone to the valley between her breasts. The night grew wild as the three of them explored each other's bodies, their boundaries shifting and morphing in the dim hotel room light. It was a dance of desire that none of them had expected, but all of them seemed to crave. They whispered sweet nothings and shared breaths, each touch and caress a silent promise of the pleasure to come. The bed was a chaotic mess of tangled limbs and passionate sighs. Rachel's competitive nature had transformed into something much more alluring, her eyes gleaming with a hunger that matched the others. Emily felt alive, more alive than she had in a long time, as Rachel's mouth moved lower, her teeth grazing her skin. Tom's hands were everywhere, setting her nerves alight. Their business trip had turned into an evening of unbridled passion, a night that would change the dynamics of their office forever. But in that moment, all that mattered was the feel of skin on skin, the taste of each other, and the unspoken understanding that for now, the world outside the hotel room walls didn't exist. They were lost in a world of their own making, and it was a place none of them were in a hurry to leave. Tom stood up, his eyes never leaving Rachel's. He slowly began to unbutton his shirt, revealing his taut abs and broad chest. Rachel's gaze followed his movements, her breath hitching with anticipation. He stepped out of his shoes and trousers, his boxers the only barrier to his arousal. Rachel's eyes widened as she took in the sight of him, her own desire growing with every second. Emily watched, her own breath shallow, as Rachel and Tom kissed with an intensity that made her core throb. Rachel's hand slipped into Tom's boxers, and she heard his sharp intake of breath. Rachel's eyes found hers again, and there was a silent challenge in them. Emily swallowed hard, her pulse racing as Rachel's hand began to stroke Tom, her eyes never leaving hers. It was a moment of pure, unfiltered lust that seemed to electrify the air around them. Tom reached over and took Emily's hand, pulling her closer to the bed. Rachel leaned back, giving them space as Tom kissed Emily with a passion that seemed to set her soul on fire. Rachel's hand slid down Emily's body, her fingertips tracing the edge of Emily's panties. The fabric was already damp with desire, and Rachel's touch sent shockwaves through her. Emily's hands found Tom's bare skin, her nails digging in slightly as Rachel's hand slipped under her panties. The room was a symphony of whispers and gasps, the rustling of clothes giving way to the sound of skin against skin. Rachel's mouth found Emily's neck, her kisses sending shivers down her spine. Tom's hands were everywhere, exploring Rachel's breast and Emily's waist, as Rachel's hand continued to tease Emily's most sensitive spot. The tension grew, each touch and kiss building towards an explosion that seemed inevitable. Tom moved between them, his hands caressing Rachel's body as he kissed Emily deeply. Rachel's eyes never left theirs, her hands still playing with Emily's clit. Emily could feel herself getting closer to the edge, her body tightening with every stroke. Rachel's other hand reached out to Tom, her fingers wrapping around his cock. She began to stroke him in time with her movements on Emily, creating a rhythm that had all three of them panting. Tom groaned, his eyes dark with need as Rachel's hand worked its magic. Emily could feel Rachel's own arousal, the heat of her body pressing against hers. Rachel leaned in, her breath hot against Emily's ear. "Do you want him inside you?" she murmured. Emily's eyes widened, but she nodded, unable to find the words to express the intensity of her desire. Rachel's hand slid away, and Tom positioned himself at Emily's entrance, his cock slick with Rachel's touch. With a deep, needy moan, he pushed inside her. Rachel watched, her eyes on Emily's face, as she felt the first waves of pleasure wash over her. Rachel leaned down, her mouth finding Tom's, tasting Emily on his lips. The three of them moved together, their bodies speaking a language that transcended words. It was a dance of lust and need, each thrust bringing them closer to the edge. Their rhythm grew frantic as they approached climax, their breaths mingling in the air. Rachel's hand found its way to her own clit, her movements matching Tom's as she brought herself to the brink. Emily's nails dug into Rachel's shoulder, her back arching as the orgasm crashed over her. Rachel's eyes never left hers, and with a final, desperate kiss, Rachel joined them, her body shuddering with release. They collapsed onto the bed, a tangle of limbs and sweat-slicked skin. The silence that followed was filled with the sound of their heavy breathing, each of them trying to process what had just happened. Rachel leaned over, her hand brushing against Emily's cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice raw with emotion. Emily looked at her, then at Tom, his chest rising and falling with each breath. "For what?" she managed to say, her voice a mere whisper. Rachel's smile was soft, almost tender. "For making this trip unforgettable," Rachel murmured, her eyes glinting with mischief. Tom chuckled, the sound a deep rumble in his chest. "Yeah, it's definitely not going to be a trip we'll forget anytime soon." He leaned in, kissing Rachel gently, then Emily. The kiss was filled with a newfound intimacy that sent a fresh wave of heat through Emily's body. They lay there for a moment, their hearts beating in sync, the room spinning with the aftershocks of their shared passion. Rachel was the first to break the silence, her voice a seductive purr. "We should probably get some sleep if we're going to be any good tomorrow." She stood up, her body a work of art in the soft glow of the bedside lamp. Emily and Tom watched her, their eyes lingering on her curves as she grabbed her discarded dress and slipped it over her head. "Unless," Rachel added with a wink, "we're planning on skipping meetings?" Tom groaned. "As tempting as that is, we do have a job to do." They reluctantly climbed into bed, Rachel in the middle, her body a warm buffer between them. Emily felt a strange sense of comfort with Rachel's hand on her waist, Tom's arm draped over Rachel's shoulder. It was a tight fit, but somehow it felt right. As the city outside the window began to settle into sleep, the three of them lay there, their thoughts racing. The room was filled with the scent of sex and the lingering taste of wine. They had crossed the line, but in that moment, None of them seemed to care. The tension of their office lives had been replaced with something raw and real, a connection that went deeper than any business deal or office politics. They lay there, the quiet hum of the air conditioner the only sound in the room, and for the first time since they'd walked into the hotel, the tension between them had transformed into something new. It was a tension filled with anticipation, a promise of what the rest of the trip might hold. They were no longer just colleagues sharing a room. They were now lovers, bound by a secret that none of them were quite ready to confront. The night grew darker and their breathing grew deeper, the world outside fading away as sleep claimed them. But as they drifted off, the whispers of doubt and excitement began to dance in the shadows of their minds. What would tomorrow bring? Would they be able to keep this hidden? Or would the lines between work and pleasure continue to blur, reshaping their relationship in ways they couldn't possibly imagine? The business trip had turned into an unexpected adventure, and as they lay there, entwined in each other's arms, they knew that no matter what happened next, their lives would never be the same.